So we're gonna start. Hi everybody again. So welcome to our weekly speaker series. Today we have Brandon Fischer with us. He's a senior product manager. Um, and we're just gonna be talking a little bit about just mindful tips, advice, practices that you can do when, especially when you're working from home, which right now is just super applicable because everybody's working from home. Literally everybody. So without further ado, Brendan, take it away.
Cool. Hey, everyone. I'm Brandon. Where do I start? So I started out in college just wanting to get into the game industry, like I've heard a lot of this group might be, or in that kind of process. And so fast forward several years, I'm now senior product manager. Um, yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen here and just give you a little bit of context on my history in games. Cool. So hopefully everyone can see that now. A little bit about my history. In college, wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I grew up playing a lot of games myself. So this is like console, PC when I could, and decided after doing some research into the game industry that I wanted to be a product person, like more in the producer and manager side of things, whereas I wasn't necessarily passionate or looking to go into an engineering career myself. At least at the time, I didn't feel like I was super artistically gifted, at least not in the individual contributing sense. I kind of chose production and really fortunately was able to find something pretty quickly out of school, which while it coincided with a major recession, also a newly budding mobile games industry where the App Store had just come out. Um, so Made some connections and eventually landed a phone call, which led me to my first job in the industry, which was for a new startup in San Francisco, and they were working on mobile games, but in a very different light than we probably think of mobile games today, which is heavily dominated, at least from many successful developers in the free-to-play space. So at that time, like Super Monkey Ball was the coolest thing ever. We had this new 3G device with an accelerometer, and so we were working on premium titles that both made use of the accelerometer and just in general were fun and delightful experiences, as we said. Um, so throughout my career, transitioned to a few places. I've been at multiple and mostly startups. Been through a few acquisitions and mergers, and also a few layoffs. But really, most of my career has been spent on both some live products and really actually more so developing products and getting them to a shippable state. So obviously, this market has been rapidly evolving over the years. So some things that kind of change were the types of games we were making. So I mentioned premium, but then there was also for a while and still exists in some cases like a free version and then a paid version, where you'd play the free version and then at the time it was actually a whole separate app that you would download and pay for the real version. Premium, again, premium titles, but also freemium was a thing. So having titles where there were some boutique purchases, but not necessarily like an economy in the game that we would expect now. Um, and then now, more closer to now, like both kind of there's the casual end of the spectrum and then the more hardcore game end of the spectrum. So I generally ended up moving in the more mid to hardcore kind of development range. So developing deep like social features that could be monetized where players were wanting to actually continue past the end game of a product and continue in like social and competitive play. Um, so during this time, actually 4 of my years, which is kind of more the topic of today, has been working remotely, whereas now is definitely a different situation than some of the previous years I spent working remotely. Um, but yeah, so we're gonna cover some of that today. And then most recently, my position, I actually transitioned out of mobile games, but fortunately still able to work on a kind of mobile game-like product where going into the digital health space, where kind of evolving tech in and science and especially neuroscience is proving out that there's mobile experiences out there, maybe some things that you guys have touched where aspects of multitasking and things can be developed in a way that's actually hitting parts of your brain cognitively and improving where there might be some sort of deficit or something that kids to adults are living with, from ADHD to depression, um, to other less common or maybe things that you wouldn't think of, like multiple sclerosis or lupus, all things that actually affect the brain in different ways. So that's what I spent the last couple of years doing. But we're going to talk about recognizing growth in your own career and like some of how skills can transfer over to industries that you might not even expect. And then at some point throughout this journey, I became really passionate about just, yeah, the merging of those, of both science and then things more on that I was interested in, like meditation and mindfulness and all the benefits that come along with that. So Coralie said practice that at the beginning. That's one of my favorite words that I'll probably use throughout some of these topics. So that's a little bit about me. And so, more to the topic of today, like mindful practices and how we adjust to being almost imposed to work from home, whether it was kind of your initial kind of setup or not. So the question I like to pose both to myself and to everyone watching is like, how do you stay grounded in this, or sane, or focused, etc. Like fill in kind of your grounding verb there. But so I wanted to cover a few topics there, and all of these I promise translate back to actual getting of work done. But I think it comes back to our everyday lives. So um, first, we'll start with the mind, right? So do you have like a routine? Can you slow down everything else that's going in your life when it comes to non-work things that you ultimately still have to get done on top of your actual job, or if you're kind of in the search for new opportunities in that realm. So we'll talk about some of what those things are shortly. So meditation and mindfulness, like those words are thrown around a lot. So what I kind of mean by that is one of my favorite mentors in the kind of mindfulness space. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. He's super old, really cool, like Buddhist based teacher and practitioner of meditation, and he's known throughout the world. But something that he always says when people bring up mindfulness, he says mindfulness of what? And so there's things that there's not just mindfulness, it's mindfulness of something. So what I'm getting at is, and my kind of main point for thinking about the mind and everything that's going on up here throughout our day to day, is finding ways to bring your mind to a calmer and even closer to empty state. And when I say empty, I don't mean like we're dead inside empty, but empty of strong, like negative emotions that you might be experiencing from day to day based on whatever is going on in your life. Things that are difficult maybe for you to transform into something more positive. So what this is really saying, we're practicing in the mundane stuff that we ultimately have to do today. Whereas meditation, I kind of think of as more of a more focused practice. You're actually concentrating. Maybe you're sitting, maybe you're walking, not necessarily doing some day-to-day activity. So that's the first kind of point I want to cover about mine before we actually get into like how is this playing into work. And hopefully you're already seeing a pattern here is that if we actually want to get good work done, we have to kind of be in control of the things we can control and be in a space where we can work more efficiently. And that has been exacerbated even more by us being forced to be in our, in our home situations where maybe we were before, but there were other things going on, or we had more opportunities to leave the house, or we had an office space where we weren't in our homes all day.
Yeah, and I want to jump in here like super quick and talk a little bit about. So I do practice a little bit of mindfulness as well, just in my day to day. Like sometimes it's just we go through so many things so quickly, and we don't really absorb anything that we're doing. We don't really notice the things that we're supposed to be enjoying. So, like, one thing I try to practice is when I'm eating, because in my case, eating does cause me like a lot of anxiety and stress and stuff. When I'm eating, I try to really sense the textures, sense the taste, sense the thing that I'm enjoying from what I'm eating, and just taking those 5 minutes between like bites of food and everything to just slow down. And it just helps me so much to just ground me, like bring me from going at 100 miles an hour to maybe a little closer to 50 or 30. I'm still going fast, but not as fast. And reminds me that like it isn't about do and just producing and just getting things out there. It's really like we have to like enjoy these smaller moments as well. And sometimes like at least with my work setup, for example, like I have a humidifier with scents that I like enjoy smelling, and I have it right next to my desk, and it just adds like this extra element where I just feel like a little more grounded and at peace because I can smell the thing that I enjoy, and I'm acknowledging that I'm smelling that thing I enjoy. So
Love
it's
it.
kind of like tricking your mind a little bit, but yeah, like what do you do, Brandon?
Well, that's a good segue into body, I guess,
Yeah.
as well, because food is something where I've definitely haven't been the best mindful eater. So yeah, eating is a great example of something that we can practice doing more mindfully, as you kind of explained, and that's a great way. So yeah, so I think there's several ways. Whereas my first point talking about the mind, right? Like I'm setting up context, but that's not always, it's easier said than done, right? Like it's not easy for us to necessarily just slow down or even calm our mind down. That's kind of what anxiety can manifest as you can't. And there's things going on. So that leads us to the body. There's different ways you can both you can kind of at least try to initiate that without having to try so hard. So you see my big picture up there. That's me running on the last trail race I did before all this quarantine went out, and that's Mount Tam. So yeah, physical activity is, in my experience, one of the best ways to actually kind of slow down the mind a little bit without maybe trying to. And even sometimes in the moment when you're doing these things, the mind is still going, but exhausting the body in a way without hurting yourself, obviously, is a great way to clear your head. So I personally never thought, growing up at least, that I'd be a runner or a weightlifter, and especially more progressingly mindful eater. And so, yeah, I won't linger on current events too much, but I truly believe that the things that we're putting in our body, and both protecting and boosting our immune system is one of the best things you can do to defend yourself. So, physical activity is part of that, but again, like what we're actually putting into our bodies from a day to day is a thing. So a lot of us have been cooking a lot more. I know we have.
So
We're
much
we're
bread.
getting supplies, and that's already a great step in the right direction because cooking can be, and I would highly recommend trying to make that a more mindful practice, especially if it's not something you ever like doing. But we can, yeah, we can really be more mindful about not just the food that we're just taking in, but now that we're actually making it, like thinking more about what we're actually making. And that sort of thing. So my main points about the body are eat well, um, get your 20 minutes of sun a day as part of your immune system boosting. Like we do need that. And so I know it feels scary that we have to stay in, but we don't necessarily have to stay in. We can find ways to get some sun on our body and move around. So for me, that's running. Running starts with walking. Like, again, I wasn't always a runner, and it's something that now I've kind of used as a tool to clear my head, and then afterwards have a much clearer, really the benefit is after the run, not necessarily during the run, where that's a good opportunity where you might find that your work, if you're trying to get actual work done after physical exercise, can be really beneficial. So my next point, soul, and you can interchange that word with a lot of things, but maybe it's your ego, your spirit, just kind of really like asking ourselves, like, what are our hobbies or passions? And I put in there, it's not just game development. So as I kind of hinted at before, like throughout my process and working at multiple companies and ultimately doing a lot of the same work, managing teams of different sizes and scale, I started, I guess, recontemplating along with my practice of like, what do I actually want? I've definitely wanted to be a game developer when I was in school, but that's not to say that that's, necessarily what you want as your life's work. Like, I think our minds and our bodies and our thought processes change. And now we're at a point where, at least for me, we've been at home and we're starting to contemplate these things a little bit more, or we're maybe not able to, and we're really focused on like the work that we need to get done. So I guess the example I like to use is like if you follow any pro sports, you'll see lots of stories of players who exactly like maybe, for me, I didn't know I wanted to be in game development until sometime in college, but some people start the beginning of their lives training for something and then realize that that's not their whole life. And so really this is just to say of like do that inner contemplation and find out like other things that you're passionate about. We're seeing a lot of creativity online now in our kind of social world where TikTok, for better or for worse, is kind of a dominating presence, and where all of us can just do something fun and silly and be able to show that. But there's also a lot of good coming out of that and creative, content where all you needed was a phone, and it's been that way for a while. Like that hasn't really changed. Now we're just kind of seeing people blossom in that respect a little more.
Yeah, and like I've been going on TikTok every night and just watching everything everyone is doing, and it's so great and hilarious just how creative people have been during, with everything going on and COVID and stuff. Like there's I'm really into Disney and Disneyland, and there are a group of people that are recreating like the parades and the rides and all the dances and everything with just like all homemade stuff around them. And it's the
Right.
silliest thing in the world, but it's so amazing. It's so great, and it just it kind of inspires a little bit of like positivity, especially at the end of a day when you're just like done and your brain just can't handle anything anymore. I know like a lot of people are like, oh, TikTok. Um, but if you were but if you were
Okay.
into Vines like 10 years ago, like it's the same thing,
Right.
and TikTok really like depending on what it is that the content that you're looking for, like it has been amazing. Like I just laugh so much every night.
Right. Pick your flavor, right? There's
Hmm.
other platforms out there as well.
Yeah.
Or just being to yourself and doing your own things that you've been thinking and working on that aren't necessarily related to any game project that you are or want to be a part of.
Yeah, and it's still kind of using your same skills as well that you would for games, just a different application.
Yep. So yeah, I guess just another point on this is that while yeah, I think we're all coming into kind of self-awareness at varying levels in our own ways, with this kind of shelter in place, if you will, and being in our home space or in kind of the same space. And so I I encourage and kind of challenge everyone to really like look inward in that and think about what it is that you're passionate about besides game, like maybe it's creating art of a specific type, or yeah, again, it could be career related, but there's probably stuff that's not career related as well.
Mm-hmm.
um, so now we can get into some action stuff. So I'll jump back to the mind and the mundane a bit. I think there's a few things that I've seen in various books and things here and there, and there's some good general ones that can, at least starting your day. I love the make your damn bed. I don't know who put the damn in there, but I've heard that in several places of like first getting going in the morning. If you have any sort of routine, I think it can be very beneficial to both be flexible but try to maintain some sort of normalcy. So even getting dressed, and so now there's varying extents of getting dressed in this kind of environment. But I'd say like in the spirit of, for days that you think, and maybe it's every day for some, it's not for everyone in this kind of climate where we're dealing with all sorts of things. But on those days, like actually getting dressed like you were going to go to work, I think has proven to me and many others that I've talked to be beneficial in just, setting yourself up for kind of success to be productive and checking that kind of that box. And again, back to the mind, like all these things that are not work related that you are still maybe responsible for, whether it's, so I'll list some others now, right? Like laundry, dishes, things that we all have. My more, I shouldn't say favorite, but dishes is maybe on one end of the spectrum for me, whereas laundry is on the way worse end of the spectrum. And so if you have a significant other, anything like, finding that balance and how you guys tackle that together, or just make that part of your own routine if you're at home. And then in the actual work, like really I have to go back up to the 3 points, right? Like how, if we're practicing this more self-awareness, and you want to be more productive and more efficient at your work, like are you actually mentally in a place to be able to do that? Because I think we've all experienced hopefully good flow states in our work where we're laser focused, we're getting a lot done. And if you go back to those times, you might realize that everything else in that time was also kind of at least going well, or you were just able to find that kind of mental space that you needed, or that body like exercise and calm state, and maybe it's more in your body. So again, I'd say that's where we can definitely get into Q&A on more specifics, but I think the action originates with everything else going on, and so the actual work that you need to get done. And so my last point here is more on community before we, you guys have specific questions. So some of us are in work transitions. Some of us, I think all of us, potentially it's worth, reaching out to your community and network with so much unease. I will share personally, like I had a job the other week and I don't. So like it's a reality for everyone in this climate where the economy is, everything's up in the air a little bit. So there's not necessarily, and I don't say this to scare you, but it's more of a preparedness thing. So whether you're looking for new work or you feel like everything's good, like I think it's worth kind of reevaluating where you're at and maybe your career, and just again, back on the passion side of things, like is what you're doing, is that like ultimately what you want to continue to be doing? What if you had to find a new job tomorrow, I guess maybe is a better way to frame it. What would you be looking at? Would if your current thing wasn't available? Um, so yeah, if I would say, again, we can correlate. You had some questions around like either like people first time experience or
Mm-hmm.
versus, so we can definitely get into some of that if you're fresh out of school versus if you're someone like me who has several years of experience now and more like looking for new opportunities sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we can cover some of
Sure.
that.
I have, just in case, I also have like some questions coming in into the comments and others from other things that you've talked about, but I do want to get into that first. We do have so many people like in not only in Puerto Rico, but like now we're coming into May. There's a lot of people that are going to be graduating, coming into this job environment where it's so in flux right now. I'm reaching out to our recruiters asking like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're talking to people, but we're not too sure what's happening." So, so
Yeah.
how do you approach the job search in sort of this climate? Like, how should you be leveraging the tools that are available to you? How tech literate and internet literate should you be in order to, I guess, maximize like what you your reach and what you can do?
Yeah, totally. That's a super valid question. As I kind of admitted, I'm also actively practicing this right now. So I've been in touch with recruiters also recently, and luckily I was able to get access to some resources, without having to pay, because there's plenty of paid services out
Mm-hmm.
there for career help and resume writing and optimization and salary negotiation, all of that stuff. We can all pay for that, but fortunately, I was able to get some resources with this last transition. And one thing I continue to hear is that, which is an interesting, just kind of reality of, and I think it's been this way for a while, but the importance of LinkedIn even over your resume to an extent. And for me, I'd rather rephrase that of like, I for me personally, I wouldn't consider one more important than the other, but as a free resource that you can use, LinkedIn is not only a great tool for networking and a lot of things, which I could give a whole talk on, like the benefits that I've experienced from LinkedIn, but also a tool if you're not a fan of resume writing. This guy right here. Like it's a great tool to kind of start that framework for you so you can begin to kind of work on it in that sort of sense, and then that can build out into the boring, really formatted 1 to 2 page, depending on your experience, Word doc version. So that's definitely something. So if you're new, you know it's been a while for me, obviously, but I pose the question, especially in this climate, if we're able to survive, can you? I don't like saying this, but um, I'll explain. Like, can you also work for free in this climate if you can survive in this climate? And it's a kind of a harsh question to ask, and I'm not asking everyone to ask that of themselves, but the reality of new experience, when I landed my first production intern position, like I actually wasn't sure. Like internships are, it feels like it's always been a 50-50. Some are paid and some are not. And
Mm-hmm.
we all know that about internships. So it was something where I knew that as a person with no experience coming literally fresh out of college with my degree, and I wanted to be a producer with no experience, like how am I going to do that? And so I think for young people, and nobody told me this when I was younger and coming out of college, but I think it can be okay. Like if you are resourceful and know how to survive, like if you can find somewhere to get experience, then you should take it. And that's kind of just a reality of breaking into any industry. I would think. So there's that.
I mean,
Obviously,
I do want to like, so I'm actually like really against that. I'm just gonna
I
like throw it out there, but I
no,
understand where you're
right,
coming from because
right,
I
yeah,
did exactly the same thing too. You know, like I did when I first started, I did a lot of projects for free. I was just trying to find like anything to fill my resume with. Like it didn't matter, just something out there. What I started noticing a little later on was I know you want to work in the game industry, but sometimes you kind of have to take a little detour before you
yeah,
actually like land a job in there, like the job that you really want in there. So like exploring other avenues, like if you have visual communication skills, if you are like a good artist or something like that, hey, maybe being a graphic designer for a little while might work. If you are a programmer but you really want to work in games, hey, maybe like working on apps or web or something else that requires programming might work for a little while. And try to find other opportunities in adjacent fields. And then eventually you come into, sorry, you come into games with that industry that you've built up, with that experience that you've built up. But I've always been like in the mindset like if you're gonna work for free, I'd rather you work on the things you actually want to work on. And if you're okay working on something for free, I leave that completely up to you. Typically, it's more trouble than it's worth in my experience. But again, I'd rather you work on the things you want to work on. And maybe working for free just to put something together as experience is you with a group of people working on a project together and creating a game together, maybe an indie game together, or having a day job, and then this is your second job. That's kind of common from what I've seen with other people that are like my friends and stuff. As a game designer, QA is another field that
yep,
you can start in. I know almost everyone I know that's a game designer started through there. Yeah, it's finding, definitely recommend finding other avenues that aren't just like literally the job that you want.
totally. I
Yeah.
can totally empathize with that. I think, yeah, again, my experience was working through college, and I guess again, very fortunate to be able to find something that wasn't a traditional networking. Like I was actually working at my retail job between finishing college, where I just through selling stuff like at the store was just making not even necessarily looking to connect with people, but made a connection which led to being an in-law at a founding of like a founder of a game company sort of thing. So agreed, like income is income. So
Hmm.
but when it comes to your like passions, and if that's in game development for your career, definitely. Like again, also wasn't an artist, so QA was something I was definitely actively looking at. But as a person who wanted to be a cool executive producer one day, like in college, um, I was just trying my hardest to find something. And so again, I was very fortunate. And I was also prepared to go into some other field like QA or even something more technical, if that meant breaking into the industry. So totally agree.
Cool. And I kind of want to segue this question into another question that is kind of related. Like, how do you start making those connections when you're just out of school? Or even during school? Like, how do you connect with other people in the industry?
Right. So I can say at least when I was in school, either I don't know when LinkedIn came out now that I think about it, but it either wasn't there or I wasn't using it at the time. So I was doing traditional resume, um, just general work, but my networking, and again, no one told me this when I was kind of in, even with a business degree, like we were learning about, mostly it felt like more marketing related stuff and like putting together pitch decks and things. So um, that's a whole other topic of like college and education and that sort of thing. But no one told me that I should be networking. So my natural networking came through my retail job, which was just dealing and talking to everyday people, which I realized too was like, even in a selling environment, I kind of naturally started not selling people and just kind of learning about them as a person and what what they were looking for, in a retail sense, and that kind of directly translates to people in a more professional sense. So we have LinkedIn now, even if you don't have like work experience that in the industry that you want to be in. I think you know people, and you probably know people that have LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Um, so I think just starting to kind of have those conversations, and they probably shouldn't start as like, hey, I'm looking for work, or hey, like, what's up? By the way, I'm really messaging you because I need a job, or it's just having real conversations with people, checking in, seeing how you might support them, and then segueing into like, hey, this is what I've been up to. I'm looking for different opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you have any like suggestions or that sort of thing? So there's a lot of different ways you can actually kind of evolve those conversations, but it shouldn't be a one message conversation ever, I guess, is the best advice I can give, especially on a format like LinkedIn, where it's very meant for professional kind of development and conversations.
Hmm. And I would suggest two things I would suggest for the people that are listening into to this talk. One, if you don't have a LinkedIn yet, you've heard that word so many times now. You need to make a LinkedIn, especially if you do plan on working on the mainland or like somewhere else in the world. At least my experience in Puerto Rico, we don't leverage LinkedIn as much. I don't know if that's changed over the last few years. But here, recruiters use it all the time. They pay for these subscriptions that let them like kind of maximize LinkedIn and find the right candidates and everything. You kind of need it. It's also just more accessible than just like a plain resume. A resume, I have to send it to you in a different document that you have to open on your laptop or maybe your phone or whatever. With LinkedIn, all the information that you need is right there. It's just a link, and I have to click, and that's it.
You just
Um,
made me think of like it's like landline to our cell phone technology,
yeah.
right? Like our resumes are the landlines now, and yes, they are still very much part of the process. However, LinkedIn, again, there's free version of LinkedIn, and you're automatically just, well, as you set up and get your profile going and actually connect to people,
Hmm.
um, it helps you out more and more, because there are, like I said, there's recruiters, and oh gosh, like I think the recruiting membership for LinkedIn, there's a few levels. So there's also premium, which I can talk about, which I've used effectively, for networking and actually like landing conversations with people, at companies that I want to work at without even having known anyone previously, maybe having a mutual connection or two. But even on a free level, there's recruiters paying hundreds of dollars a month basically to optimize their search,
Hmm.
for keywords that you are putting on your profile. So
Yeah.
it's just a reality and a tool that should be definitely used.
And for those listening again, we are planning a talk just about recruiting and maximizing your resume and everything like that. So we will like dive deep into that in the following weeks. But everything Brendan and I are saying, like 100%. Like one, you need your LinkedIn. Two, polish it. Like make it super accessible, make it super legible for everyone, so that they can understand exactly what you worked on and how you kind of provided value to that project or whatever it is. The second thing I kind of wanted to mention was LinkedIn also has groups in it where, if you're interested in game design, if you're interested in narrative design, etc., QA, all that stuff, there's ways for you to connect with like-minded people through LinkedIn out of just Discord or Slack or any of these other platforms that we use. Definitely like leverage them as well, and again, they'll immediately see your LinkedIn profile. They'll understand like where you're coming from and everything, and they'll have a better sense of the person you are, rather than just like being, like you said, a one-off message where it's like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And it's like, oh, I don't know you.
Yep.
So yeah. Uh,
And to that point, just a funny like side story on LinkedIn. Like I've had people reach out who I didn't know, and I've had varying levels of good and not so good conversations where they'll even, I mean, it's pretty easy to pick up like a kind of a small talk or like somebody wanting to genuinely connect with you, or at least, get involved with whatever company or thing that you're doing. But I've had conversations drag on where eventually, admittedly, like, hey, could you actually connect me with your VP of engineering? Because that's actually what I really wanted the whole time. And it didn't feel like a great conversation the entire
yeah.
time. And then the ask came at the end. And ultimately, you're just like, cool, I now have this connection on LinkedIn that I don't necessarily want or need to have. And and yeah, we end the conversation there.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a little strange. Like I've talked about it before in with this group, but just establishing genuine connections is really important. Like people want to know that you're people. Like you actually want to know about that person and see their well-being and everything. That's why like I always recommended like volunteering at conventions or volunteering for different organizations that you really enjoy, their mission and everything like that. Like just full on like cold emailing someone that isn't a recruiter is, unless you've met them before or like someone recommended you to talk to them or anything, it feels a little strange. I'm not saying 100% don't do it, but just be mindful of the way that you're actually, making that approach. Like, actually, this week was a perfect example. I got two messages from two different people. One of them literally just emailed me, hey, I just saw that there's a UX position. Can I apply? Who do I talk to? And I'm just like,
no, don't do
yeah,
that.
like, what office? I don't see this role anywhere. Who are you? like like what is going on? So like I just kind of said, I asked them like, hey, what office, because we have multiple offices. Two, I don't see the role anywhere in where I'm located, so I have no idea who to recommend you. And I just ended up just kind of giving them the recruiter's LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and that was it. And I just like backed off because I just like I have no idea who this person is. Whereas another person, he went into like, hey, my name is so and so. I work in this industry. I'm looking to transition over into this other industry. I saw like your experience and what you're doing right now, and I think it's really awesome because that's what I want to do. Would you be willing to have a 15 to 20-minute chat with me in the next couple weeks? Yes. That's how you do it. and
Yeah.
and that's what we're going to do. Like next weekend we're just going to kind of chat for a little while for me to understand where he is, and then based off of that, like whatever it is that he wants, like at least I know this person a little bit better.
I would also, yeah, I would add to that on the recruiter side. I feel like throughout my career, recruiters in general get bad or good raps. And I think this really just goes back to what we're talking about now. There's good conversations and bad conversations. So I would say, especially for the new people, those are the connections you can start with. Like, actually seek out recruiters. Don't necessarily, and again, not any recruiter, but recruiters are looking. That's part of their job, is actively looking for
Mm-hmm.
people like you. So. Who are ready to work hard and want to be part of something that is bigger. So I think it's just a good place to start, where again you're just having conversations, and there's different types of recruiters. There's, as Corley mentioned, there's usually a specific recruiter for the company, but then there's also recruiters that are just games industry recruiters for, like, because there's entire companies dedicated to
Yeah,
just
like
recruiting. And
headhunters.
yes,
Yeah,
so headhunters sound scary, but like, I've met some awesome headhunters,
they're
and
really
if
awesome.
you're having good conversations, then things will move in the right direction.
Um, cool. So I want to transition into another type of question.
Okay.
Um, Actually, before I go into my questions, I do want to go ahead and address two questions that came up. So the first one is, do you have any recommendations for students that are struggling to focus on their studies these days?
Whew. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to the mind aspect, right? My wife is a school psych, and I've been seeing this a lot through just general observation. Like, yeah, younger folks are really struggling right now, being at home. I actually wrote a note here that I think, I had this in kind of the more like soul ego section of like finding your purpose and passion, like, um, really thinking about that. But especially when, yeah, where social interaction is I believe a really key part to like our development growing up. And so when that has been kind of taken away to an extent, I think we have to find ways to get that kind of social interaction. So, well, that's with friends, like remotely, or again, like looking back at like the things that you like and trying to find outlets there is kind of the best advice I can give. And then back to the mind, practicing. Like, I guess when I can admit that when I first got into meditation and like neuroscience and that sort of thing, it was totally on the more ego side of things, where I was like, ooh, like enlightenment, like, and all these cool like buzzwords in terms of like, how is my mind gonna crazy expand when I start meditating? But what I found as I started practicing, it was really a tool, and not an easy tool, especially when starting. But it was a way for me to ease my mind, and not, it wasn't about gaining enlightenment in some way. And that is part of the enlightenment process, arguably, is being able to be with yourself, and all those kind of swirling emotions going on, again, especially for the young people I'm seeing, where I can't necessarily, like, I have my own, experiences, but it's in a much different context now than when I was in school, or even before that. So I think, and worry about a lot of different things than what a lot of younger folks are probably thinking and worrying about on a day-to-day basis. So practice, find ways, whether it's in the stuff that you, like said, the mundane stuff that you have to do, and slow that down. um, there's lots of breathing practices and guided meditations for different types of things. I'd be happy to share a ton of resources that I've used over the years for different types of emotions and things like that, whether it's just needing to calm down, or actually like more, talking about specifically anxiety or things going on, and more specific practices, I guess.
Yeah, for me, what was I going to say? For me, one thing I kind of mentioned a little bit before, just, taking that sort of space to really appreciate like slightly smaller things. Like when you're eating something, like actually like tasting it, chewing it, feeling the texture, it just kind of grounds you a little bit more, whereas others are like more like scent oriented, like just having something that I enjoy smelling or flowers, looking at it. Those tiny little things, having them around my work area just help me immensely. It helps me remind me that I'm actually here in this physical space rather than just like, oh my God, all these things. I have to do this, and everything.
You,
Also, I kind of want to add like just taking breaks are really important.
yeah,
Like, I know we want to just sit down and work 8 hours a day. Our bodies can't handle that, like nonstop. Our bodies really can't handle that. So, taking a 15-minute break every hour and a half, please do it. Even if it's 5 minutes, just kind of like walk around, stretch, get some sun, come back in. Like you need
that's
it.
a great point. Couple ads there. I didn't cover that in the body section, but like, I went straight to like physical exercise, and that doesn't have to be like the thing that you start with, or again, your more day to day. I can tell you personally, like both my wife and I try to take separate like loops. So if we need to during the day, we can get our own solo time, or or we can take a walk together too, if that's something as well. So body, exercising your body can be a lot of different things, and part of that might just be taking a walk, getting out for a minute, and kind of disrupting that cycle when you might get stuck, whether it's in the work zone or in a more negative emotion. And then I'll add too, in like your practice, if that's something you're really struggling with, you can really narrow it down to like one words in your head, but whether it's an intention. So if you're feeling like depressed or anxious, and that's a lot of that is down here in your heart, like as Coralie mentioned, if it's eating, maybe you're thinking gratitude, you're trying to practice gratitude, like I'm grateful for the food that I'm putting into my body. um, there's lots of fun, very simple practices of just like appreciating Earth in general. Like it was Earth Day yesterday, right? So like your senses, like being thankful for your sight and for the sky and things like that, where you're actually practicing like breathing and like practicing gratitude for those things when you know that your mind and your body is like really feeling negative emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
again, just it's definitely practice.
Yeah,
And
it's something I've been practicing them too. It's something that takes time because
yes,
we're just not used to thinking of things that way.
yep,
So, one thing
like
that has helped me a lot is attaching a word to a memory that I really, really like. And whenever I feel super anxious, whenever I feel like, oh my God, like like something is crawling inside of me and it's going to jump out of my skin or whatever, which is, the anxiety. Using that one word, attaching it to that one memory that I just really love and really enjoy. And that memory for me can be very, very vivid. Me on the beach, feeling the sun, with my dog, and all these things, smelling the actual ocean, and all of that is just tied to memory. So once I'm able to transition my mind over into that memory, it completely reduces a lot of just the feelings that you have. Again, this is a practice. This is not something that you're gonna like overnight, or even the first time you try it. Actually, the first time I tried it was really bad. It was just like, no, this is not working. But over time, it does take time. One thing I kind of wanted to ask you, so, and to give you some context, in Puerto Rico, the how do you say it? I don't know if we still have a curfew in place, but
mm,
their shelter at home policy is a lot more strict than it is in California, to the point where you're actually not really allowed to go outside. You can't go to the beach, you can't go to the park. I'm not even sure if you can like actually really like walk down the street, that kind of thing. And people can correct me in the comments if you like. But it's a lot stricter.
Mhm.
So, what do you recommend people can do, like within their homes or maybe in their backyards? That's still kind of like getting a little bit of that exercise in, or just something that they can do to take a break.
Yeah, I mean, my favorites, which usually are reserved for the weekend, are any sort of gardening, whether it's if you have that space, and maybe you don't have that space either, but yeah, cultivating the land, if you will. Are there spaces that you do have where you can mindfully practice that sort of thing? Um, it's crazy seeing like how much home improvement is also happening across, at least here in the US. Even walking or driving around my neighborhood, it seems like everyone's trying to fix up their living space a little bit. And I mean externally, because that's what we see, but I imagine also internally, like my wife and I have done, like tidying and that sort of thing, keeping not just thinking of dishes and laundry as a thing, but like actually like cultivating our living space to be a more peaceful environment. So we've spent the past few years even kind of purging, if you will, stuff. We had stuff and we have a lot less stuff now. And I'm very happy about having less stuff. So that can come from anything to little who's its and what's its, from clothing to food. A lot of, I'd say, like through this practice, we've definitely not consumed less food, but we're more mindful about what we're purchasing at every kind of trip as well. So, um, yeah, maximizing use of your space and not having your space be taken up by things that aren't benefiting you mentally, I guess. So I'd say that's, yeah.
All right. I guess I'm gonna, because we're almost at time. I'm gonna ask one more question for you. It was one of the first questions
I don't
that
mind
got
staying over
that.
if you have it too.
Do you have any favorite genres you like to work with in games?
Games genres?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, work with is interesting. I'd rather answer play with, but yeah, like because I started in mobile, it was interesting. Like the time I was at in college, where all the books I read about getting into game development were all very console or even PC, but mostly console kind of based development studios, which are I actually have never actually been a part of a AAA game studio working on a big project, but that's what I really wanted to work on in school. Like I thought I was going to go to Bethesda and like work on the next Elder Scrolls for, 10 years or whatever. Which is not how my career has played out.
Yeah,
But
for me it was Valve.
yeah,
Valve
see,
was like, yes, I am.
yeah.
That is what I'm going, and it's there. Yeah, no, I haven't worked for Valve, guys.
So I would say my genres are definitely in the RPG range, and how I was able to translate that and was more recently actually kind of where we worked together, Corley, but
Mhm.
Beyond Games had, while it wasn't the genre specifically I would have picked before joining Beyond Games, we were working on a more RPG version of what we ultimately built. But yeah, it was all rooted in free to play and, kind of what we now see and expect in a lot of games today. And so it's a lot of features and a lot of connected engagement and loops designed to make us hopefully want to spend some money eventually and support the game. But yeah, I would say RPGs are definitely my favorite genre, both to play and what I would, a giant MMO experience. I think maybe in future time is what I want to potentially work on. Yeah.
Super cool. For me, it was. I really, really enjoyed working on AR and VR experiences. It was just so different, so different, and even now, like, I'm at Niantic. They do AR experiences. Like, I can't talk about anything, but yeah, like I feel like every talk is like this. I'm sorry, guys, I can't talk about anything, but no, like it's been very fun. It's been super super fun.
Can I just add too, like Final Fantasy VII specifically? Like, I don't, this has never happened in my entire kind of life history of games where I was so into a product in the late 90s, and now today I'm like the biggest fanboy playing this new experience that they've rebuilt, and
Hmm.
it's made me rethink my whole perspective on remakes. Like we get so many remakes in whether it's movies or other games, and this is something else entirely. So um, yeah,
Same
that's what I'm
story.
playing right now. Yeah,
Yes, same
if you're
story,
wondering.
told a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandon.
Yeah, no, thank
Yeah.
you for having me. I can't see all of you live right now,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you guys jumping on, and hope even one point I made today can kind of help you in moving forward. And sounds like you guys are going to get a lot more kind of follow up stuff on both LinkedIn and networking and all
Hmm.
that good stuff. So
Yeah.
let
We.
me share this last slide real quick if you want to
Sure.
connect.
Yes.
Pretty standard. Mindful Brandon is my kind of tag right now. So that's my Gmail and the LinkedIn kind of. Another LinkedIn pro tip, you can make your own custom URL once it's set up.
Yep.
So you can put whatever you want in there, make it professional and not too weird.
Yes, please. LinkedIn professional. Keep it professional. And keep it also to like you as a person, not you representing a company, kind of.
Yes.
Because I've seen some LinkedIn's where it's like, classifieds online wants to connect with you, and you're just like,
Yep.
okay.
My previous tag literally had games in it. It was my last name, Fischer Games. So like that's another tag that I've used for a lot of years throughout game development. If you're just looking for ideas.
Yep. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up. If you can, there are maybe like a couple other questions in the comments. It would be great if you can go ahead and just reply to them in the comments.
Yeah.
But yeah,
To
I
jump
hope
in.
I hope you have a great day, Brandon.
Thanks, you too.
All right, and bye
Everyone.
everybody.